You probably did it today, without even realizing it. You trusted someone you'd never met before. Maybe you stepped into a taxi. Maybe you ordered food online. Maybe you handed your bank card to a waiter. Maybe you told a delivery driver exactly where you live. You didn't know their childhood, their intentions, their past, or even their last name. And yet, for a brief moment, you placed your safety, your money, or your privacy in their hands. But here's the strange part. The person you've known for years, the person who says, "Trust me," somehow, they're harder to believe. Why? Why do complete strangers sometimes feel safer than the people who love us most? Tonight, we open another file, not to judge, not to accuse, but to investigate. Because if trust is one of the strongest forces holding human relationships together, why does it seem so easy to give away and so difficult to keep? Case file. Number 002. The trust paradox. Trust is one of the most valuable things a human being can give another person. It can't be bought. It can't be demanded. It can't be forced. It has to be earned. Or at least, that's what we like to believe. Because the truth is far stranger. Psychologists have spent decades studying trust, what creates it, what destroys it, and perhaps most surprisingly, why our brains sometimes place trust in the wrong people. Tonight, we're following the clues. Imagine this. A young woman named Emma arrives in a city she's never visited before. It's getting dark. She opens a ride-sharing app. A stranger accepts the trip. Minutes later, she climbs into a car with someone she's never met. She doesn't ask where he grew up. She doesn't ask whether he's honest. She doesn't ask if he has good intentions. She simply fastens her seatbelt and trusts the system. Now imagine something else. Emma's older brother calls her later that evening. "I think you're making a mistake." She immediately questions him. "Why? What makes you say that? Are you sure?" The stranger received trust almost instantly. The person who has loved her for decades had to prove himself. How can that possibly make sense? At first, it doesn't. Until we understand something important. Trust isn't always built on familiarity. Sometimes it's built on predictability. The driver follows traffic laws. The app tracks the journey. The payment happens automatically. Every part of the experience feels structured. Our brains love structure because structure creates something psychologists call perceived safety. Notice the word perceived, not actual safety. Perceived safety. Those two things are not always the same. The human brain isn't designed to calculate perfect truth. It's designed to make fast decisions. Thousands of years ago, our ancestors didn't have hours to decide whether something was dangerous. They had seconds, sometimes less. The brain learned shortcuts. Psychologists call them heuristics. Mental shortcuts that help us make quick judgments. Most of the time, they're incredibly useful. Sometimes, they quietly lead us in the wrong direction. Think about uniforms. Imagine someone walks into a room wearing a doctor's coat. Instantly, most people assume competence. Now imagine another person enters wearing ordinary clothes. Even if both people possess the exact same knowledge, many of us will naturally trust the one in the white coat more. Nothing changed except the symbol. Our brains often confuse symbols with certainty. Companies understand this remarkably well. Why do banks have marble floors? Why do luxury hotels smell a certain way? Why do expensive stores play soft music? Because every tiny detail quietly communicates the same message. You are safe here. Whether that's true is another question entirely. But trust isn't only influenced by places. It's shaped by people too. Let's meet someone else. Marcus. Marcus recently started a new job. On his first morning, everyone smiles. Everyone introduces themselves. Everyone seems welcoming. One coworker in particular, Jason, goes out of his way to help him. He remembers Marcus's name, offers him coffee, shows him around the office. Within a few days, Marcus begins sharing personal stories. Nothing deeply private, just enough to begin building trust. Why? Because Jason made him feel understood. Human beings are remarkably drawn to people who seem familiar. Not familiar because we've known them forever. Familiar because they remind us of ourselves. Maybe they laugh the same way, share similar interests, come from the same hometown, support the same football club. Even tiny similarities can quietly increase trust. Psychologists sometimes call this the similarity effect. We naturally feel safer around people who appear similar to us, even when those similarities have absolutely nothing to do with whether someone is trustworthy. Now compare that to the people closest to us: family, partners, close friends. Unlike strangers, they've seen us at our best and at our worst. They know our insecurities, our failures, our mistakes. Real relationships don't only contain love, they contain disappointment too. Arguments, broken promises, misunderstandings, moments that leave tiny cracks. Not because the relationship is unhealthy, because every real relationship eventually collects imperfections. And sometimes, those imperfections quietly become doubt. Here's where the paradox becomes even more interesting. Because trust isn't only built by other people, it's also shaped by us. Every experience we've ever had quietly teaches our brain what to expect next. If you've been betrayed before, your brain remembers. If you've been lied to, your brain remembers. If someone you loved broke your trust, your brain remembers that too. Not because it wants to make you suffer, because it's trying to protect you. The problem is that protection and accuracy aren't always the same thing. Imagine touching a hot stove. The pain teaches you something valuable. Be careful. Now imagine someone burns their hand once and becomes afraid of every stove they ever see. The lesson has grown larger than the evidence. Our emotional lives can work the same way. One betrayal can quietly influence 10 healthy relationships that follow. Not because those people deserve suspicion, but because fear rarely asks for permission. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional learning. The brain doesn't simply remember events, it remembers how those events felt, and feelings have an incredible way of shaping future decisions, sometimes without us even noticing. This helps explain something many people have experienced. Meeting someone new can feel surprisingly easy. They don't know your past. They've never seen your failures. They've never watched you break down. You get to introduce yourself, one conversation at a time. But the people closest to you already know the chapters you'd rather forget. That kind of closeness can feel comforting. It can also feel vulnerable. And vulnerability is often mistaken for danger. Ironically, the people who know us best are usually the people with the greatest ability to hurt us. Not because they want to, because they've been close enough to matter. A stranger's opinion might ruin your afternoon. A loved one's opinion can stay with you for years. That's the cost of emotional investment. The deeper the connection, the greater the potential impact. But here's something psychology teaches us over and over again. Trust is not the absence of uncertainty. It's the decision to move forward despite it. Every meaningful relationship requires that decision, again and again and again. So, how do healthy relationships survive? Not because both people become perfect. They don't. Not because mistakes never happen. They do. Healthy trust grows because people become predictable in something far more important: repair. When they make a mistake, they acknowledge it. When they hurt someone, they take responsibility. When conflict appears, they move toward the conversation instead of away from it. Trust isn't built by never falling. It's built by consistently getting back up together. Now think about the opposite. Someone who constantly makes promises but rarely follows through. Someone who apologizes, but never changes. Someone whose words and actions keep moving in different directions. Eventually, the brain notices, not because it's being cynical, because it's recognizing a pattern. Psychology doesn't build conclusions from one moment. It watches what happens repeatedly. Patterns reveal character far more clearly than isolated events ever can. Perhaps that's why trust feels so fragile. It takes time to build, seconds to break, and often far longer to rebuild, like a sheet of paper. You can smooth it out after it's been crumpled, but the creases never completely disappear. So where does that leave us? Should we trust no one? Should we become suspicious of every stranger? Should we question every person who says they care about us? Psychology offers a different answer. Not blind trust, not permanent doubt. Discernment. The ability to remain open without becoming naive, to remain cautious without becoming closed, to evaluate people by consistent behavior rather than first impressions or old fears. Maybe the real paradox isn't that we trust strangers too easily. Maybe it's that we often confuse familiarity with certainty and uncertainty with danger, when in reality, both strangers and loved ones must earn trust the same way, through honesty, through consistency, through actions, repeated over time. The next time someone says, "Trust me," don't ask yourself, "How long have I known them?" Ask instead, "What patterns have they shown me?" Because time doesn't automatically create trust. Character does. 2 files, 2 mysteries, 2 reminders. That human behavior is rarely as simple as it first appears. Some people trust too quickly, others not quickly enough. And somewhere between those two extremes is where healthy trust quietly lives, not in certainty, but in evidence, not in assumptions, but in patterns. This has been Mind Unraveled. Case file number 002 is now closed. Until next time, stay curious. Question what you see. Look beneath the surface, because the most important clues are almost always invisible. And remember, every mind leaves clues. For more intriguing cases like this, like and subscribe. Thank you.